Alright, this is the perspective warp lesson. And so far I've started with a picture of a living room with a coffee table here. And that's going to be my background for this image, for this example. And I've got a picture frame as well. And I've taken the background out of the picture frame, so I just have the picture frame here. And now the next thing I'm going to do is, using the polygonal lasso tool, I am going to select the inside of this picture frame and take it out so I can put the picture of the bird that I have selected inside. So I'm just going to delete that, and now here's the picture of the bird that I'm going to be using, and I'm going to perspective warp it inside of this picture here. I want the bird to be flying this way from left to right. Right now it's from right to left, so I'm just going to press Control T, right click on it, and flip it horizontal so it'll be flying out. And I want it to fill the frame. But first thing I want to do is I want to select the bird, take the bird out of this picture, and clone stamp where the bird was. So let's see if Photoshop can select the bird. It did a crappy job with the bird, so I'm going to use the quick selection brush, which is W, and then you can cycle through the tools right here, make sure that I'm adding to a selection with, and now I'm just going to select the bird the best I can with this, and then I'll probably use the lasso tool in addition to. Now if this was my assignment as a student, I would definitely use a better picture. For the sake of this demo, I just found a picture that I could use very quickly. But I would expect you to use a better picture. This one is very blurry. So now with the lasso tool, I have the polygonal lasso tool, so I'll press Shift L and go to the regular lasso tool. And now I'm going to hold Shift and include parts of the bird. And I'll do a quick select and mask, quicker than I want you to do, just for the sake of this demo to keep it going. Okay, now I will select and mask. So this bird, because it was so blurry, it's just a bad example of, or it's rather a good example of why to pick better pictures, because Photoshop wants to take a lot of the feathers out of the selection because it's so blurry you can't tell what it is. So for the sake of the demo, I'm just going to go with that. I'm going to put a mask on it. It looks okay. I could have done a much better job around this bird, but for the sake of the example, I'm just going to move on. And now, to collapse this mask so this background is deleted, I'm just going to convert it to Smart Object, right click on it again, and rasterize a layer. But I did that wrong. I clearly want to keep the picture. So in this instance, I'm going to I just pressed Control Z to go back because I forgot what I was doing. So now I'm going to press Control J. So now this bird is on its own layer. I'm going to rename this bird so I know what it is. And this B-ground for the background. And now I'm going to turn this bird off. I'm going to turn the background back off. And now I'm just going to simply use the clone stamp tool like we did last lesson. Set the target area, and I'm going to start. I need my brush to be blurry, and I'm going to clone stamp this guy out. Alright, now this is going to be my picture. So here's where the perspective warp comes into play. I can press Control T, move it behind the frame, excuse me, and I can scale it up a little bit so I can see that the corners are going to reach, so that needs to be a little bit taller. And what I can do now is simply right click, choose perspective, and this guy will fade back into the background. The foreground, it looks like it's becoming a 3D image. So this is how you perspective warp. If we were making a project where we wanted to make a road or something, that's what we would do. You could find a picture of a road and then perspective warp it in the background or into the distance. Now we're going to be working more with this in the future, but for this example right here, the picture frame is a rectangle, and it's more of a portrait. This is a landscape. So what I'm going to do is, using the marquee tool, I'm going to select more of that shape so I can use that. So I'm just going to save this. So I'm going to press Control J, and I'm going to delete that part of the image. So I'm just going to be using this, and I'm going to use a different way of warping. And I'm going to drag this image in front of the frame and turn the opacity down so I can see it. Now I'm going to press Control T, and now I have Control T selected. I'm going to hold the Alt key, and I'm going to select a corner. I'm sorry, I meant to say the Control key, and I'm going to hold the Control key, and I'm just going to move the corners to the corner of the frame. And now it looks as if, and I'm going to go a little bit bigger than the frame, just a little bit, so when I move this picture behind the picture frame, there aren't going to be any gaps. So if I press Enter, turn the opacity up, and move this behind the frame, it looks like it is in the frame. And now the bird is going to be flying out of the picture frame. And I'll scale them up a little bit. So the bird is flying right out of the picture frame with the peanut. To make this pop a little bit, I added a white background here. I'll turn the opacity down. And now it's a little less saturated. I also could have turned down the saturation. But what I'm going to do now is add a shadow. So I'm going to use my paintbrush, and I'm going to press D to make this color black right here. And I'm turning the opacity, or the hardness, all the way down. I'm going to make my brush scale up a little bit, and I'm just going to add a shadow in front of the picture frame and underneath the bird, so it looks like it's actually flying. So this is going to be for the bird, and I'm going to put that underneath the picture frame, which I believe it is. Okay, and this one is going to be labeled bird shadow. And I'm going to press Control T, and I'm going to perspective warp it. So I'm dragging the bottom towards me so it gets bigger in that manner, like that. Okay, now I'm just going to turn the opacity down on it. I'm going to do the same thing with the picture frame. That looks pretty bad, so I'm just going to keep going down with it. I'm going to do the same thing with the picture frame. Maybe in the end, when I'm done doing this, saying that looks pretty bad as a shadow, I would redo it, but for the sake of the video, I'm just going to keep rolling on. So I can get this done before class. Control T, right click perspective, and I'm going to drag it out a little bit. And I can right click on it again and do free transform and hold Control and just drag these corners so they actually fit behind the picture frame after I've done the warp. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is turn the opacity down on it. So now that looks kind of bad, but it looks a little bit better than it did when the picture frame is just on top of the table without any shadows. So I'm just going to stop there. That is the example.